Advice from a hurricane. I decided to talk about the last two hurricanes, which many of us on the west coast of Florida experienced back to back. I'm talking from the point of view from the hurricane. I actually get these really cute little cards from, I think it's EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, where it says advice from a butterfly, advice from a ladybug, advice from a penguin, advice from a polar bear. I like them. They're very inspirational, and some of them are funny. And, of course, they're about nature. I believe that we are going to experience forever these intense storms. Helene was not only a Category 1, but it was a cyclone, a tropical cyclone. We had incredible storm surge. Then we had a Cat 3, and we were a direct hit. I am lucky that I live in a fortress. Nonetheless, once I leave the condos, it is destruction, devastation, that you feel as though you're in a war zone. And this has been going on since the end of September. I liken this to someone who's going through the war in Ukraine, but we are just the tip of a head of a little pin. This is nothing compared to what's going on there. So here's the advice from a hurricane. It's natural to be frightened of me. However, don't stay in fear and being frightened. Get outside of yourself and help others. When you experience my wind and my rain, honor the fact that it is temporary and blue skies will shine through. If you have experienced loss, the best thing to do is to help others. It will take your mind off of my brutality. There's more information on my podcast details about the advice of a hurricane. One of them is to get outside of yourself. Focus on other people's needs because it will strengthen you and it will strengthen others. I lived in New York for 29 years and we had northeasters and blizzards. Where we worry about the impact of the water here on the west coast and on the east coast of Florida, there in New York, you worry about the piles and piles of snow on top of your roof. While we worry about losing power here, perhaps being caught in sweltering heat, there you worry about losing power and freezing to death. I can handle heat almost any day compared to sleeping under covers with my cats for 2.5 days. The advice of a hurricane or blizzard is to respect your knowledge in surviving and helping others during a catastrophe. Lastly, I just want to remind you, look at the podcast details because Price Pritchett also talks about, I quoted something from him in regards to getting outside of yourself. This hurricane taught me quite a bit because the first thing I did the next day, Friday, was to get on my bike and ride around and see if I could help people. Because again, I live in a fortress. We didn't really need anything here. The carports were damaged, but and I volunteered to help people pick up limbs and branches and move some palm trees that came down. But it's really outside of my fortress where people needed help. I made sure that people had the numbers to FEMA. I made sure people understood that there's also an organization called Get Hope. I also went with a friend, because I bike, with a friend to a food distribution site. You just open your trunk and they put food in the back of your trunk. This was not for us. I grabbed anything chocolate I could have because I definitely needed a chocolate fix. But this was in order for me to bring to some restaurant people I know who have been out of work for quite a while. I also gave away the frozen meats to our maintenance guys because they have been working round the clock since the first Hurricane Helene. Well, those are things you can do in the face of catastrophes, whether it be a storm or something else. But remember, advice from a hurricane: it's natural to be frightened. Don't stay there. Check out my podcast details because it has really some great suggestions about being in contact with your friends, helping a neighbor. Be in contact during a storm. Don't weather the storm by yourself. I played cards with my next door neighbors, and it helped. I actually slept through the 120 mile per hour storm, and that's because I was not sleeping from Helene up to our new hurricane. I'm including Kundalini Yoga's Abundance Kriya. It's about 18 minutes. One of the reasons I'm including this is because it has some of the most beautiful, calming music you have ever heard. I strongly suggest, if you don't want to practice yoga, I totally get that, at least listen to the music. The music is specifically about having abundance. And after 2 hurricanes back to back, I feel extremely abundant because I have my health. I have the ability to regain my mentality from having hurricane brain for 3 weeks. And I have the ability to help others. That was one of the first things I did. Lastly, am I even going to talk about wine? Well, I think you should probably have a glass of wine or some bubbles to celebrate that you have made it through a couple of hurricanes or any kind of catastrophe. I no longer really drink, but when I was playing cards with my friends, I had 2 glasses of wine. Even though drinking does not help you sleep, I slept really well that night. So to wrap this up, advice from a hurricane, advice from one of the strongest forces out there when it comes to Mother Nature. It's natural to be frightened. Don't stay there. Get out of yourself. Get out of your cocoon. Get out of your bubble. See who needs help. If that means going to a free food distribution site, do it. If that means knocking on your neighbor's door, making sure nothing has happened to them, making sure that they're not going to stay frightened, let people know that you're there to help them. It helps you. I'm Valerie Hale. I create this podcast once a week to help people improve their mindset because remember, thoughts become things. That's Tut. It's a website. It's really cool. He has great information. Also, I teach online classes to help people overcome their fear of public speaking. That's always in my podcast details. Merci. Au revoir.